This is going to be fun.
What was that? Ed hasn't eaten?
No.
He's in a bad mood and he's hungry.
God help us all. Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday the 13th of May, and joining me on this edition are Mark Hodgkinson.
You've seen it, you've heard it, and you're still asking questions.
Mark Botwright.
I'm beginning to enjoy it.
Steve Withers.
You better send a meat truck, try to cut the saucepan in the throat.
And Ed Selley.
That Skag and his floozy are going down. Steve
was the only one that managed a hint of Aussie accent there.
Oh, that's what that was.
Hello and welcome along to the AVForums podcast. So before we crack on with some hardware news, let's go over competitions. Kingston HyperX Cloud Gaming headphones, 18th of May, that competition closes. And the two competitions that we told you about last week that just went up at the time of the podcast going up, 55 Days of Peking Blu-ray, 1st of June that closes, and the Dirty Harry competition for the full collection Blu-ray is the 5th of June. Right, let's move on to some hardware, and where am I going to go first? I think I'm going to go Ed first, because Ed had a nice little jolly. Went out and did some serious investigative reporting on PMC's new subwoofer.
I did. Obviously, in a perfect world for AVForums reviews, the product comes to us and is reviewed in our surroundings with which we are familiar with, which is why what I wrote last week is a first impressions and not a critical review. Because at the moment, having heard it at Bristol, the total number of PMC 20 subwoofers in the world is still pegged at 1. So, and it's off to Munich. Actually, I believe it will have left for Munich today as we record this. So PMC very kindly let me come down to Metropolis Studios, which they have been involved in for some time. And I could listen to it in situ there. Obviously, it's not a room with which I am entirely familiar, and it's not equipment with which I'm entirely familiar with. So it was more of, if you like, getting a handle on what it does in an environment more forgiving than just listening to it at the show. And obviously you can read my thoughts, but it's a very impressive device. If you are looking for something which is going to recreate the brown noise, forget it. It's not one of those. It's much more in the vein of the Eclipse TD520 SW sub, which I did the review for as part of the Eclipse system. It's an effortless way of adding really an extra octave of excellent bass to speakers that already have quite a lot of excellent bass. So it's extremely fast. Lovely integration with the other PMC 20 speakers, it must be said. Don't get me wrong, the room had been treated, but nonetheless, the speakers were free-sighted. There were limitations to exactly what the room was going to do for integration under those circumstances, and it worked really, really well. The kicker was two things for me. Using it to play Rush, which, as I've said before, you get a lot of effects in the sort of 30 to 60 hertz range, so it's constantly crossing over between full-size speakers and the sub, and really, really lovely integration on that. And then there's a Stevie Wonder live Blu-ray which had been mastered at Metropolis, and that was the tie-in there. I'm not, I like a bit of Stevie every now and again. It's not something I will swim rivers and climb mountains for, but it was really, really excellent. Don't get me wrong, it's not cheap. It's £3,000, and there's plenty of competition. But nonetheless, I was really impressed by it.
I guess the big thing here is that obviously PMC used transmission line technology, so maybe you could quickly explain that for people who are not up to speed with what transmission line actually is.
Transmission lines are hateful. It's like trying to explain how a rotary engine works. I know the principle, but it still seems to basically come down to
You mean a wankle?
I'm going to say rotary engine because you can say that word. It's I don't need to degenerate into that level. Effectively, basically by putting a very large pathway from the back of the driver to the outside world, it's possible to use that air in such a way as to increase the frequency response of the speaker without any of the downsides of a short conventional port where you get chuffing and audible movement of air and so on and so forth. And the 20 sub has got two whacking great 7-foot lines in it, so it's a fairly sort of large example of the breed. But it's one of my points of ignorance why it works why there's essentially an enhancement beyond that of a conventional straight port, given essentially, as I understand it, that actually momentum of air is lost. I don't understand that, but it works, and PMC are particularly good at it.
Just say it's magic, Ed, and we'll all believe you.
I was happy to say it was magic, but I felt compelled to try and do something better than it's magic.
I mean, basically, I guess the simple explanation is it allows you to do things with A, either smaller drivers, or B, smaller cabinets where you could fit them into the wall. So a lot of the wall subwoofers that you see actually use transmission line technology to move air around and so on, so they don't rattle the baffles off.
Yes, that's fair enough. And I mean, obviously there are limits to the size. I mean, so much as having a proper there's an algorithm for the ideal length of the line, and after a while it's going to affect the size of the cabinet because it has to be fairly large. But nonetheless, given the size of some of the competition at £3,000, the 20-sub is actually a fairly... It's certainly very narrow, and it's actually a reasonably easy thing to accommodate.
Oh, of course, the one that you've seen was a bit more than that because it's the only one of a kind, so it'd be a bit more expensive.
Well, yes. I mean, obviously, you can't put a price on pre-pros, but...
They are going to make more, though, right?
They are going to make more. Production starts imminently, but for the and what I listen to, I am assured on pain of death by PMC is exactly to production spec, so there's no jiggery pokery going on. And it must be said, I mean, maybe I don't know, maybe I've just worked for companies that used to produce really bad pre-production samples, but it's beautifully finished. So it really does look like the finished article.
Well, it's the one for the shows as well, isn't it? So it's front of house version. Yeah, totally. Okay, so interesting, and I guess we will be in line to get one of those in for review properly once we have a production sample to
absolutely, yes. We haven't decided yet whether we want to do it on its own or whether we want to get a complete set of 20s in, do the whole shebang. So I'm interested on feedback for that. What would people prefer? I can do either or.
Yeah, I'm sure people will let you know in the comment section on this podcast. So
can I make a request, Ed? Can you ask them to please use a capital T in their marketing material?
Well, they don't. It's not just the 20s. The facts also do without a capital F. So it looks like capital letters are actually being eliminated systemically.
Like very E.E. Cummings of them, but it's really annoying when you're proofing copy.
Just so people are aware of this, Steve's really angry because I submitted my copy with 20 written lowercase as correct. Steve decided he didn't like that at all.
Being the pedant that he is.
Then changed it all to capital 20. And then I had to say to him, could you change it back because it's not supposed to be that way? So Steve's just annoyed because it's half an hour of his life he'll never get back. So,
and also, when you say test material, you use Rush. I assume you're talking about the film and not the popular three-piece musical combo.
We are indeed talking about the film and not the masters of Canadian.
Right. I thought you were talking about the rock band.
Well, there's a time and a place for Rush, but I didn't feel it was. If
1984.
If I had used a Rush album, I would have said it was a Farewell to Arms or so on and so forth. Whereas italicized Rush means it was the film Rush.
I'm glad we put that to bed, Ed. Right, so let's move on to display technology. OLED is the big thing at the moment. Obviously, Steve had a look at the first LG screen of the year and the second screen of the year. Actually, it should have been out last year, but it's just being released now. Falls to Mark. So, Mark, this is also your first review of OLED. So
it turns out that the nearest I got before was a Samsung Galaxy S4 phone, which is a 4.5-inch screen, which doesn't have quite the same impact.
Mind you say that, I think the biggest I've reviewed so far was a 15-incher. So there you go.
Well, that's a monster compared to the phone, so, count your blessings. Turned up on Friday afternoon in a very large flight case, so I've had the weekend with it. Unfortunately, it was a bit of a busy weekend, so not quite as much viewing as I'd like, so we're still in the early stages of appraisal here, but amazing, yeah, it's a superb thing. Everything that Steve said before about the incredibly deep black as you like, it just kind of sucks you in. I've watched football is what I've got to see a bit of.
It's a bit disconcerting when you're not sure.
Yeah, really.
You can't
really
tell if it's on or off sometimes.
There's that screensaver it got that goes around the screen, and if you're not looking at that particular part of the screen, you would think it was completely off, and then the screensaver would jump into your eye line and then give you the fright of your life. It's it's quite a thing.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. OLED television's terrifying.
Terrifyingly black. Colours out of the box are really good. I kind of went off it a bit this morning because it was a bit of an intense calibration session. But even out of the box, it is pretty damn spot on. Motion handling, I really like it. I've got no issues with it at all. The one thing I would say is if you're watching broadcast sports or any of the broadcast sort of HD content, it does need a bit of sharpening. It looks a bit softer than some of the LEDs.
That's an interesting point, because I've just had a huge flight case, also Mark, turn up, that wasn't supposed to turn up. Ended up unpacking the TV outside, but that's another story. So I've got one of the first Panasonics in this year, CX700, 50-inch screen, and standard definition looks absolutely terrible. I don't know what they're doing. I mean, it's a 4K screen. I don't know what they're doing, but it looks really bad.
Well, I can't say I've actually watched any standard def on this 65-inch 4K screen yet, and I'm not going to rush to, because if anyone's buying this screen, they do not want to be watching standard definition.
We have to cover for a large majority. I will
give it a quick glance, Phil. I will give it a
quick glance. Claim mine's bigger than yours here, but I'm not watching standard def on a 78-inch Ultra HD 4K telly. Then
invite Mr. Botwright round to watch some Magnum on it.
Well, see, the reason I mention it is that you will have people that will go out and buy these TVs, like my parents, and even though they pay for Sky HD and all the rest of it, they'll be watching the standard def channels.
Well, so if you're going to go and spend £6,000 on a television and then watch shit on it, then that's your hard luck, to be honest. But yeah, anyway.
Said an AVForums spokesperson.
It doesn't matter. You've got to think that people buying these TVs are either Premier League footballers or they are into picture quality in a serious way. Yeah,
but I mean, there is a serious point there, Mark, though. We're talking about moving to 4K. We talked about this last week in the podcast. It's going to be difficult to find a 1080p TV soon, but we're still going to have standard definition channels.
Which is why I think there's still definitely a place for a full HD set. Even a 720p set for the older generation, that's going to do most of them, who are all watching standard def still, and probably will do till they die. The closest I've got to SD with this is watching upscaled through the TiVo, so I think Jenny was watching something on TV2 yesterday. It wasn't actually all that bad, to be fair.
Yeah, it surprised me, that's all I'm saying, because the Samsung I had in before that, which was a 4K screen, but it was only 40 inches, I didn't really notice any issues. This is a 50-inch screen. I'm sitting pretty darn close to it. And it was the first thing I thought, wow, this looks really bad. It could just be, because I haven't messed with any of the settings, it could just be set up in shit.
Yeah, the out-of-the-box settings are no doubt awful, aren't they? Awfully garish. So, yeah, in terms of what I've actually watched of high-quality content, other than, obviously, football, I watched the BAFTAs last night. That looks really good. There was a lot of people wearing black tuxes and suits, and all the details are present in the shirts, and all the creases are quite. I spent my time looking at everyone's clothes, not no one's faces. It's just a rather odd way to watch TV, but
the life of a TV reviewer.
Yeah, the life of a TV reviewer, and yeah, the shadow detail is fantastic, and I must say the whole show, it looks spectacularly good. I watched House of Cards on Sunday night, episode 1 of season 3. That was amazing. That's got to be the best thing a TV program, quality wise, I've ever seen by a long, long way. I mean, obviously the whole package with OLED, isn't it? The contrast and the colours and the resolution as well. So you could get right up close to it within a foot or so, and it was still sharp. It looked absolutely gorgeous.
But this is why I was mentioning standard definition material before, though, Mark. A lot of it is, if you put shit in, it's gonna look shit on the OLEDs, and I think that's what's maybe causing some of the strife on the forums.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah, are you jammy bastards? Is all I can say, Mark. I was trying to watch X-Files night before last in HD on Netflix, and I was getting my internet was throttling it, and I was getting what can only be described as sub-standard def images.
Oh, you get that mighty effect,
284p.
Yeah, it was unwatchable. I just pulled a stocky at that point.
If you left it on for 10-15 minutes, did it fix itself or not?
No, what happened was it would drop down, then it would come back, then it would drop down, then it would come back, then it would buffer for a bit, then it would come back, then it would buffer for a bit. It was really, really annoying. And then in the morning, I checked, I did a broadband speed test, and I was getting 8 megabytes a second. I thought, well, why is it crapping out at night when I want to use it?
Because everybody else is on.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
And if you're a mile and a half away from the exchange, you've got everybody that's within that mile and a half also throttling the exchange.
So annoying because the next morning I put on the same episode for a few minutes just to see, and it looked really good. You know, even on a 78-inch screen, I thought that's quite watchable.
No, before you ask,
what?
You're not watching TV when you're supposed to be working.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've got no choice, to be honest. It's not a great time to be watching TV. I don't really want to enjoy a drama series over my cornflakes, particularly. It's just not the same as a glass of red wine, is it?
That's what I had to do last week, though. Last Tuesday morning over breakfast, I watched Game of Thrones because it was unwatchable the previous night for me. So, anyway.
So
anyway,
OLED, Mark.
Yes,
Yeah,
OLED, back to OLED. Yes,
jammy bastard.
Steve's rubbish internet again. Now, in terms of issues, now, as I say, I was still at the early stages of appraisal, and tonight and the next couple of nights, I'll be really giving it the full treatment, fully sober and in the dark.
But what about the TV?
So moving off angle, the curve and the filter and the anti-reflective coating make a difference, particularly when you've got a solid block of colour on the screen. There's a kind of a pinky, rosy tint to the whole thing when it's off. So, you know, if the sun's or if any light reflecting back, it's got this pinky magenta tint to it. And it changes as you move to the side of the screen, move your head to the side or walk to the side slightly, and it changes the picture quite dramatically on say a full screen white pattern or a creamy pattern. Typically you'll see these, you know, adverts normally, and slightly off to the left there's a kind of a bluish greenish kind of a tint, uneven tint to around the center of the screen, but the corners are kind of pinkish. Go further to the extremity and it becomes far more pink to the corners and the edges, and you still get this kind of mottly bluey green, or greeny blue rather, sort of tinting, uneven tinting to the screen. So I think that's something that people have been complaining about, and it seems to be a combination of the curve, the filter and the anti-reflective coating, just creating the way the light sort of reflects on it, I think, as much as anything.
So is that on axis or just off axis?
Just off axis. Like literally you're full on banging where I sit usually. You can't really see any sort of tinting or any issues really. Move your head slightly to the side, and again I'm talking on full screen pale colours. You can start to see the tinting. So I think it's, you know, a lot of it's probably down to the curve as much as anything, and the way the light refracts off it.
So would you rather have that or a LED LCD backlight?
There's no competition at the moment. It would have to be OLED. Absolutely have to be OLED.
What if there's hypothetical, but what if there was plasma available? Which would you rather have?
4K plasma. Nah, I'd still go OLED, I think. Give me a couple more days, but yeah, it's those blacks. You know, it's going to be hard to go back. It really is, as they say.
Once you go black, you never go back.
Exactly, and I can see why now.
What's the motion like on it?
I really like it, Mark. As I say, I watched loads of football, and I was really plasma-like.
Did you watch QPR getting relegated?
I did. I took great pleasure in that. Sorry, Steve. Yes, I enjoyed that a lot.
The motion handling I find is better than LCD, but not quite as good as plasma. It's kind of somewhere in the middle in terms of.
I think with the 4K content, I think with the 1080i, I'd say the motion's not quite as good.
Did you run the moving lines benchmark test?
Not yet. No, still got to do that. But with 4K, the motion looks super, absolutely super. But there's not the scaling or de-interlacing to be done. It looked gorgeous, I thought. But we've all got different tolerances when it comes to motion. Really, right, seriously different. I've certainly no issues with it at all.
Neither did I, actually. I'm just curious.
I was going to say, one of the things that I always find what shows it better is, I know some people on the podcast might not like snooker, but it is a fantastic test for looking at motion.
Yeah, I've said that in the past. I've actually quoted snooker in the reviews. Because it is definitely because the sort of random sort of interaction with the white and the cushion and with spin and different speeds and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, the snooker's not been on, but I'm sure I can hunt some out. But certainly with the footy,
always got bloody.
No issues. Sorry,
I think snooker's awesome for many things. The detail in the bays, the colours of the balls, the blacks of the tuxedos and the shirts and stuff. It's a great test for.
Yeah, the green of the bays at I can't remember which championship it was. I measured it with the Klein, and it was absolutely Rec 709 at 100% sat. It was perfect. It was. I didn't measure the reds. I didn't move it around too much.
Again, folks, the life of a TV reviewer.
Yeah. Well, I had my thing out. You know?
Well, anything you do to get through it.
Yeah.
What you do in your own time is none of our business, Mark. To yourself, please.
Yeah, it's stunning. It's been stunning. I'm looking forward to spending a little bit more time with it.
Who's this Klein bloke?
You know, Calvin.
Right, let's go back to Ed. Ed, Oppo, they're well known for their Blu-ray players.
Yes.
They're well known for the audio stages in the Blu-ray players. They take serious audio seriously, but they're taking it even more seriously.
Yes, it's interesting to watch a company developing an exit strategy. Having, let's be honest, Oppo have very successfully made the Blu-ray category. They don't have a monopoly. Don't get me wrong. There are fine products made by other people, and some of them actually are rival products and not simply Oppo products in another box. But we have to face facts that Blu-ray is, it's on a downward curve, and
Steve, cover your ears.
And it doesn't necessarily look like 4K Blu-ray is going to be a particularly immense sort of money spinner outside of sort of specialist applications. So they've obviously been starting to look at other sort of avenues. Some time ago, about a year ago, in fact, I reviewed the Oppo PM1 planar magnetic headphones. And it was a complete sort of out of the blue thing, because there'd been no indication up until they arrived that was where Oppo was looking. But it was absolutely not a sort of me too or half thought out or half-arsed piece of kit. It was a seriously well-engineered set of headphones. I thought, well, that's quite interesting. But now it's been followed by a seriously good headphone amplifier, HP1, and then there's the new one, the upcoming review. It's all written, so it will actually appear in due course, rather than me promising it'll appear in due course. It's on the site, just ready to go. A new, smaller, compact Oppo headphone amplifier, and it appears to be a category that the company is moving into with exactly the same single-mindedness and willingness to tweak what we take for granted a product should do at a given price point. And they're taking it very seriously indeed, and it looks to be where they want to move next. I mean, don't get me wrong, Oppo is a biblical company. They do many other things. I mean, they make a huge number of mobile phone handsets. They just don't import them into Europe, as best as I can work out. So they've got other things to be cracking on with other than Blu-ray. But no, they've obviously taken one look at the headphone market, and rather than just sort of wading in with a bit of branded goods here and there, they've taken a technology which is not commonly seen and tremendously difficult to do, planar magnetic drivers. They've been building planar magnetic headphones with that technology, and then building headphone amps to run it. And they are very, very unusual, very distinct, and very impressive products. So yeah, they are showing a very serious move into sort of serious audio.
Have you run those latest ones in yet, Ed?
Well, they're ongoing. Well, obviously nothing's happening at the moment because my system is in bits, ready for me to put it back together again exactly as it was. But no, they've got about 100 and something hours on them now. So yeah, we're getting there.
But do you think it's a name that people will associate with audio?
No. Which is why they've clearly taken to heart that they have to try twice as hard as any of the brands that people have heard of. So, yeah, if you only need to do a side-by-side with either the big planar magnetic headphones or the headphone amps, the two headphone amps they do, to realise that at a given price point, the Oppo isn't just a bit better spec, it absolutely annihilates the opposition. It's just decisively better, and that's their way of doing it until such time as I guess they feel that they've got a more of a market.
I've got to say that headphone DAC/amp that you have recently reviewed, but I don't think it's gone up yet, looks gorgeous.
It is, isn't it? It's the company that's doing some of the UK PR for Oppo. The phrase that they used is "it's very Dunhill," and they're absolutely right. It really does come across like that, and it's one of those things where it doesn't have to have some of the details it has on it. It just, they've done it to make it look seriously impressive and to give the spec, something to further carry it on. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even a big listener of music on my iPhone, but even I was thinking, I want one. Yes, really, really want one, and I can't quite explain why. Well, that's the whole. I think it's very impressive that they managed to get that down pat. And there's also, that's something that's sort of ongoing, because don't get me wrong, the PM1 headphone is a nice thing. It's beautifully made, clever use of materials. It feels impressive. The box it comes in is just a bit over the top. It's sort of wood which has been lacquered to the point where you can see your face in it, and it just doesn't feel quite so nice. The HA2 they've really sorted it out, and they've got rid of any of that sort of overdoing it. It just feels excellent.
I'm not surprised though, because if you look at their Blu-ray players, they were always beautifully made, well thought out. The lovely packaging in terms of the box. There was a bag inside the box and everything. It was they always did that really well. So just taking that ethos and applying it to other products. And good luck to them, really.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I don't know what's coming next. I mean, I don't even know if they're exhibiting at Munich, if there's anything new that we're going to see. But no, I look forward to it.
Are you heading out to Munich, Ed?
I am, yes.
What days are that happening?
Well, when this podcast goes live, I will be getting ready to go to Heathrow Terminal 5. I'm then back on the Friday, and if at all possible, I will get my thoughts and images up over the weekend. So you'll get to see what I've seen whilst the show is still live. Can't say fairer than that.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so let's move on slightly, and a subject which I know that a lot of listeners will struggle with, and I'm quite amazed that we haven't had more agony uncle letters about this subject. And it's basically about mounting your TV, wall mounting your TV. And are you a real man?
I like this OLED, but not that much.
Basically, the question comes down to: are you a real man, and could you do it yourself, or are you like Ed, where you need to get a man in to do it, and even then it doesn't really work?
That's not. I need to stress.
I think a man in to do what exactly? Sorry, before we go any further.
I didn't want
mount the TV.
Yeah, I didn't want to besmirch the reputation of the bloke. The bloke was absolutely fine. There's just the bracket I was recommended to buy for this infernal bloody television doesn't actually fit. So he is now going to turn his considerable experience to that, and I'm sure it'll come back. I'm quite happy to admit that I have no intention of drilling walls in my own house and risking stuff I own and can't easily replace falling to the ground.
I'm with you, Ed. I am absolutely bloody useless when it comes to that. But
this sort of
the important question, though, Ed, is how high is the TV mounted on the wall compared to your seating position?
It is fractionally above, but the idea was that it was a tilted bracket, so it was then going to angle down ever so slightly. The reason for that is the room serves two purposes, and I need to be able to get more. The photos are doing the rounds of the enormous rack that I bought. I need to start being able to use the entire top shelf of that. So that's the priority, and that means moving the television ever so slightly higher than would be absolutely optimal in these conditions.
Now, guys, I know you look at a lot of the home cinema setups that are on the forums like I do, and I think the number one thing that always sticks in my mind is mounting the TV too high. The temptation of mounting the TV up high on the wall. Worst thing you could do, really.
It's that one above the fireplace, isn't it? Quite often, that's just that little.
That's the one usually above the fireplace. It's too high. You're looking at too high. It's too high up, and you're craning your neck and bending it to look up at an angle, which is in itself not necessarily that comfortable. But the problem we've discovered with a lot of, certainly with TVs that, and this is, to be honest, this is mostly, but not all exclusively, but mostly LG, who use a passive filter. They have a polarized filter across the front of their TVs, so you use passive 3D. If you're at too high or too low an axis in the vertical plane, you'll quite often find that the image is, it becomes unwatchable pretty quickly. So
it's also the same with Panasonic plasmas and LG plasmas. There's over that like a Lou filter, isn't there? Which really looks weird from above or below. Completely knocks the light put out.
Two or three good reasons there, not to try and, if you're going to do a wall mount, don't put it too high up. And I know that sometimes you kind of compromising a little bit because you want to put it in the lounge and you want it sort of central, but there's a fireplace there and you're going to put it above the fireplace, which might seem like a good idea, but it may not necessarily be the best thing in terms of actually watching the TV. If you don't watch a lot of TV, don't bother. But if you watch a lot of TV, it could be an issue.
I've got a mate who's got one and it's too high, and even just sitting watching the football for 10 minutes, my neck is sore.
But how high are we classifying as too high?
Well, if you think what a fireplace is what usually up to chest height on me, but I'm small.
But I mean, assuming that optimal is your eyes are pointing from seating position in the centre of the screen.
Yeah.
How high are we saying is too high? To the point where they're around the bottom of the screen?
Anything where you have to raise your head slightly to look at. It should be bang on level with your eye once you sat down.
I think though,
you shouldn't be looking up.
But with the fireplace kind of above those, that kind of placement generally tends to happen where people have to make a choice between optimal TV position or optimal speaker placement.
You know, in those occasions, Mark, I think the best thing that they could do is shove your TV in the corner at eye height rather than
knock out
up.
the fireplace.
Yeah, take the fireplace out. That's not going to happen.
That's the hardcore solution.
Yeah, they're actually better putting it on the visual plane in a corner of a room than putting it above a fireplace.
I think the stands are quite good because they're generally at the right height for average furniture.
Oh, the stands on this Panasonic TV, it doesn't fit my TV stand. What are they thinking?
I've had that.
Phil, that's been going on now for a couple of years, mate.
I've had to turn TVs down because of that. Because
they're all pain, actually. I mean, at least Sony had the good idea of creating, giving you the option of moving those little feet from the edges in towards the centre more, so that you can do exactly what you're trying to do, Phil, with that Panasonic, which I think was quite a clever idea.
You need to buy yourself something like I've got. I don't think there's many TVs out there.
Ed, I've ended up using the top of the flight case.
What is this problem? The bottom of the stand is too big?
No, they put the feet at the far points of the TV. So if you think about the width of the TV, the stand feet are at the edges, and there's nothing in the middle. So if your TV stand is not as wide as the TV...
Oh, right.
Maybe I can get in on the act now, because obviously my stand is 165 centimetres
Yes, we all
wide.
know that you've got a big rack, Ed.
Massive rack. Well, as I say, I make no bones about the fact that as and when this thing finally goes up on the wall, it will be slightly higher than ideal, although actually not any higher than it's already been.
But why are you mounting on the wall, Ed?
Because I need, well, two reasons. One, as it stands, it's perched upon a £9 IKEA plastic box to give it the necessary clearance in front of some other items. And that means it's a little wobbly when my son decides to, investigate it. So one, it's going up on the wall along with the Ellipson Planet speakers, simply so they are safe for at least another, 10 or 11 minutes. And then, as I say, it then frees up the complete top shelf of the rack for me to get review equipment through without having to disconnect as much stuff. And then when I have a review set of AV speakers in, they can go in without the Ellipsons coming out now as well. So it's as much being done for pragmatic reasons specific to what I do than a desire to improve performance or aesthetics.
You couldn't review TVs because you'd have to get a man in every time you had a new one delivered.
Yeah, well, that's why I haven't
like we say,
the fact I know absolutely dick about the business of actually working out whether the picture's any good or not. It's like, yeah, it seemed all right. Watched a couple of episodes of Street Outlaws, seemed legit.
Like we say, the life of an AV reviewer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a complicated life. It really is. So, Steve, what's our general advice about mounting your TV?
Well, obviously, as Ed's found out, make sure you get the right sized bracket for a start. I mean, most TVs these days use 400 by 400 Visa mounts. Obviously, there might be exceptions to that, as Ed's discovered.
The mount's fine. It's just where the main socket is.
What I tend to find with, a lot of wall mountings look great. I mean, they look really nice. So the important thing is, first of all, think about viewing angles, not just the horizontal viewing angles, but the vertical viewing angles. So don't have it too high up. With certain panels, like mostly obviously VA panels, you don't want to be looking at too much of an extreme angle because you're going to get a drop off in performance as soon as you start doing that. And on this year's Samsung TVs, I've got to say, this isn't really a problem with the 78-inch because you're always pretty much centre of the screen no matter where you're sat with that thing. But certainly with the smaller screen size, 55 inches or even lower, and I'm sure both Phil and Mark can back me up on this one. Once you move about 10, 15 degrees off of centre, you start to see a notable drop off in performance. So
on this year's Samsung's terrible off axis.
Yeah, they really have got a very narrow optimal viewing angle this year. So the backs, look great for an LCD, but unless you're sat dead center, you're going to start seeing a fall off in performance, particularly in terms of contrast.
What about the 78-inch? Was there a fall off? You wouldn't be able to get 10 degrees, would you?
To get to an extreme angle, you've got
next door.
Be next door, yeah. I mean, it's almost the entire wall of the room, so it's just not an issue at the moment. And I'll tell you what, that curve really does come into play when it's that big. You do get a sense of more immersion on a curved screen that big. So suddenly, like the curve and everything starts to really start thinking, oh, this looks great. It's a very impressive television. It's just hellishly expensive, and I couldn't really see a justification for spending that kind of money on a TV. If you want to go that big, you might as well get a projector. for a lot
Yeah,
less
yeah,
money.
but again, it's Premiership footballer type.
Exactly.
customers,
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
not going to be sold to very many people. I suspect. I'm obviously at that range. The 65 inch is going to be, even that's not cheap, but that's going to be the bigger seller clearly because it's a more practical screen size. But it delivers all the same benefits like a full array backlight and really good local dimming.
And what does my Canada footage look like?
Oh God, it looks so good. Honestly, some of those shots you feel like you're going to fall into them. They really are impressive. Yeah, they look stunning.
That's when 4K makes sense, when it's on a big projection screen or on a big TV like that. That's where those extra pixels really make a big difference.
Yeah, it is really impressive on that TV. Really impressive.
And that one's HDR as well. So did you watch some HDR
I've
content?
got some very brief, some stuff that Samsung gave me, a little brief clips of Exodus. The stuff that we saw, in fact, when we were at that closed door demo at CES, looks incredibly impressive on this TV. Yeah, I mean, it really is. One day, fingers crossed, one day I'll be able to watch all this. But the only delivery format is going to be like Amazon Prime and Netflix. I am buggered for some time.
Yeah, good stuff. Right, okay. I think we've mentioned everything we've got coming up for review in the near future, so we don't need to go through that. So coming up next is games news that's not games news. So, Mark, no games news this week. That's because, hopefully, you've recorded the games podcast.
Yes, we did it early this month because Steve's away. We've talked about Valve's U-turn on mods. Which one of us, or all of us, were hyped for Star Wars Battlefront after the gameplay trailer. The cancellation of Silent Hills and how much PS4s with it still loaded on are going for on eBay. And Guitar Hero Live after their reveal trailer.
Right, so that's the games podcast coming up at some point, Mark.
Yeah, whatever. I'm watching MacGyver.
Welcome to Magnum.
Oh, Magnum's over. That finished at 3. CBS Action, you've got MacGyver. Just showing a shot of a horse being lifted up by a helicopter.
Well, people do watch CBS Action then.
Yes. I am it.
You are it.
Well, I actually say that, but I've been watching Next Generation.
Yeah, we've got Streets of San Francisco on after this.
I didn't know it existed till the weekend.
They put lots of
Found
stuff
it back,
on towards the end of the Freeview channels, and then they take it off. I don't know if they... Oh, yeah, they've still got the horror channel.
The horror channel? I've never even heard of these channels.
Oh, yeah. Channel 70
Freeview.
on
Freeview, Steve. Rather than just using your...
They've got a horror channel, but yet they haven't been able to find enough programs to fill their remit. So therefore, they've had to extend it to like Doctor Who's, and so it's horror channel / sci-fi and anything vaguely geeky.
Anything cheap they can pick up. Yes.
I do watch Freeview, but I mostly watch BBC 4, occasionally BBC 2.
Don't get you.
Yeah.
I mostly watch things with explosions in.
So basically all you watch is loads of stuff about Hitler, loads of stuff about astronomy and so on.
Funnily enough, The Darkness of Adolf Hitler, which I can say is an excellent series and worth watching if you want to.
And tits and bums and other stuff on Game of Thrones.
Yes, and also, because it just started again last week, Penny Dreadful's back, so that's really good.
So you're the person who watches all the stuff on Hitler.
I used to watch a lot more than I do now.
I had one on the other day called Nazi Psychopath Killer. I think as if Nazi wasn't bad enough.
He's a bad one.
Yeah.
Bad egg Nazi.
Well, you say that, but there was one on the other day about the decent Nazi.
Oh, yeah, that was about Himmler.
Yeah, I know. And that was the
What
title
was it
of
called? The Good Nazi or something?
No, it was the decent Nazi.
Oh, the
He was the
decent.
It can't be the
he was
good
decent
Nazi
one.
because that was the name of the biography of Albert Speer. True fact.
It was called the decent one because that's what he was referred to at the time, although clearly he was not at all decent. The guy was a total psychopath and, was responsible for slaughtering 8 million people in Europe in the death camps. But, that was quite a misleading title, I think. But I guess it got everyone to watch it initially. Interesting, his daughter is still alive and runs a charity for ex-Nazis. It's called something like Secret Aid, I think it's called. And they raise funds to help out convicted Nazis.
Anyway, is that games news, Mark?
Yes, that is games and Nazi news.
Right, so Steve, what's at the cinema?
Got Spooks The Greater Good, which is, the name might suggest, is the new film sort of sequel to the last season of Spooks. It does carry over a few of the characters. Obviously, Harry's there, which is Peter Firth's character, and a couple of others do turn up as well. Basically, I don't think that many people left at the end of the last season who were still alive, so there weren't that many to carry over anyway. But obviously they've added on some new characters, predominantly Kit Harington from Game of Thrones, Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, who plays an ex-MI5 agent who gets brought back into a plot involving an escaped terrorist, and Harry basically going on the run to try and find out who helped him escape from within the organisation as a sort of a mole in there, somebody who's helping them out. It really wants to be more Bondish and more Bourne-like than perhaps the TV series. It's got a bit of a bigger budget, so you get some scenes in Berlin, some scenes in Moscow. Mostly, though, it takes place in London. They at least capture London quite well. Some really nice shots of London and things like the Shard and that sort of stuff. But it does rain a lot. So at least it's a realistic view of London. It's not that kind of picture postcard, blue sky, sunny version that you get in lots of films. It was kind of a more realistic version of London, and I really enjoyed it. It's got some nice little action set pieces, some nice little plot twists. There's things like people putting envelopes under the door, with notes in them and that sort of stuff. So old school spy movies, bit of Bourne, bit of Bond, but not too much. It hasn't quite got the budget to do that, but it does at least try. And Kit Harington's a reasonably sort of charismatic leading man, along with Peter Firth playing Harry Pierce. And by now he can do that in his sleep. I don't think it will do that well at the box office in terms of a cinema film, but I imagine it will do very well in terms of DVD and Blu-ray or streaming services, where I think it's going to appeal more, because although it's shot 2.35 to 1, clearly it's following up from a TV series, and it still very much feels like the TV series, because the TV series itself was trying to be like 24 and a bit of Bond and a bit of Bourne anyway. But yeah, it was good fun. I gave it, I think, 7 out of 10. I didn't actually review the film. It was Sharina, she gave it 7 out of 10, and I'd agree with that.
Do you have to have any knowledge of the TV series, or can you go in cold?
No, you can go into this cold.
Okay, let's move to films opening this Friday now. The first one is Pitch Perfect 2, which we can forget about. I don't think any of us lot will be going to that. I think the big one, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it may just be Mad Max Fury Road.
I think this will be the big release this week, and probably one of the big releases this year. A film that's been a long time in the making.
No, that always spells disaster.
Well, it wasn't their fault. They were going to shoot. Obviously, if you've ever seen a Mad Max film, it takes place in a post-apocalyptic, Australia, basically. Deserts are a key element of this. The scorched earth, etc. And I believe when they went to start shooting initially, there was some massive rainstorms and they got washed out, which was not really their fault. But it has been a long time. Certainly, it's been in pre-production and writing. That's been going on for a good 10 years at least, maybe longer, since they were first talking about doing a new Mad Max movie. Obviously, it's taken so long that Mel Gibson's too old to play the part now. Well, Mel Gibson's too old and probably too mad to play the part now. Tom Hardy is now playing Max in this version. Having seen the various trailers, it looks as though it's part reboot, part sequel, part remake. It seems to be a bit of everything. But it's been a long time coming. It's been a long time making. They shot it about, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. It was shot. There's been a long time in post-production in terms of the effects, in terms of editing.
They shot it at the same time as The Hobbit, because I remember both were in pre-production and production at the same time. So
that would have been back in 2011. So that's even longer, nearly 4 years. It's been a hell of a long time in the coming. Why is that? Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily because the film's been in trouble. I just think it's an incredibly complicated film. If you look at the trailers, you'll see the level of physical effects and stunt work that went into shooting it, and then the amount of time it's been spent editing it and doing the post-production effects. It was shot in 3D as well, native 3D. So it's been a very complicated production. George Miller has thrown everything but the kitchen sink at the screen by the looks of it. Along with Tom Hardy, you've got Charlize Theron and Nicholas Hoult. It looks like it's going to be great fun. I mean, certainly if it delivers on the action stakes, and I'm sure it will, it's going to be a great fun movie to watch. Whether it'll work in the context of the previous 3 films, how that's all going to tie together, I don't know yet, because I haven't seen it. I'm seeing it on Friday night. But I think it's going to be great fun. And I know George Miller knows how to use 3D because he's used it effectively on things like, what did he do? Happy Feet. Bit of a change from Happy Feet to this, but anyway.
So they're going to stop in the middle and break into a musical number, are they?
There won't be any singing or dancing penguins, I assume, but maybe there will be.
Right, okay, so let's open this up. Mr. Botwright, are you going to the cinema to see this?
No.
Ed?
I'd love to, but it's very unlikely.
Hodge?
Not a chance. I don't think I even want to watch it on disc. It looks shit to me. The trailer looks awful.
I don't know who this is for.
It just looks.
Well, hang on.
Hang on. I'll tell you who this is for. This is for Chris McAnany.
Yeah, made it for one man. Yeah.
Especially when he told us this morning that he's going to the cinema dressed as Mad Max to see it.
That'll be fun.
And he's not joking. That is genuinely true. I mean, he did remember when he went dressed up as Wolverine to go and see.
Yeah, and broke his ankle. What was it? His ankle or his
no,
wrist?
that was James Bond.
Oh, was it? Right.
Broke his ribs, didn't he?
Yeah, he fell off a post box drunk as a Wolverine.
With like knives tied to his finger.
Like we say, the life of an AV reviewer is not like that. Chris is a one of a kind, totally.
Chris is up for this. Yeah, this film. The question though, who is it aimed at, is a good one. I think that's a very valid question because out of the people here, who's a fan of the original Mad Max films?
Love it.
I think we all are.
Yeah, I liked it.
It was all right. I didn't get the whole, because I didn't see it when I was at high school when everybody else saw it and when it first came out. I kind of seen it a few years after that, so it didn't have the same. It'd be like seeing Star Wars in the 90s compared to seeing it in the 70s when you were a kid. So it didn't really do much for me. It was all right, but
I was really into it. I was too young to go and see it at the cinema, but I remember seeing the trailers and thinking, God, that looks amazing. I really, really want to see that. And then I did get to see that and also Road Warrior Mad Max 2 on video in sort of early 80s when the video rentals first started. And I absolutely loved them both, particularly the Road Warrior, which I think is probably one of my favourite films. Obviously, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, not so good.
Understatement of the year.
Yeah, all right. Although I watched it again recently on Blu-ray and I quite enjoyed it and it wasn't as bad as I remembered it being back in the mid-80s. But from 85 was it that film came out? So we're talking nearly 20 years later. Oh, Christ, 30 years later.
30, yes.
30 years later. God, I'm feeling old. Who are you making this film for? Because clearly the people that there's a whole generation that maybe moved on now aren't going to bother with it. The young generation aren't going to have a clue what they're talking about, which I guess explains why it's being slightly rebooted and remade in a way. But you have to wonder who this is aimed at, other than Chris McAnany. It's a valid question. We'll see, I guess, with the box office. But
so that's like 6 times you said it's a valid question, and who's it made for?
All right.
Are you going anywhere with this argument?
It costs a lot of money, so someone better go and see it.
But it won't be anybody on the AVForums podcast, as we've found out.
I'm going.
But you don't count. You go and see movies anyway. You just like that. Anything worth buying on Blu-ray, Steve?
Yes. Yeah, I think there is stuff that's worth picking up on Blu-ray. Couple actually. Next week, there's 3 films coming out on Blu-ray. None of which I've seen. In all fairness,
make up your mind. One of them, 2. No, none of them.
Well. 3 films, one of which I definitely would like to see. A Most Violent Year with Oscar Isaac, which looks quite interesting, had good reviews, and I quite fancy seeing. Foxcatcher's coming out. That's also had very good reviews, but I have to say leaves me absolutely cold. I have no interest in seeing the film at all. That's the one with Steve Carell and Channing Tatum and...
The wrestling movie.
Yeah, it's the wrestling movie, and Mark Ruffalo. Had fantastic reviews.
That surprises me. That really does surprise me, Steve, because I would have thought lubed up men is exactly what you do.
It's not that kind of wrestling.
It's proper wrestling.
One thing. Yeah, it's actual proper Olympic wrestling. No, I just think Steve Carell's performance. I know he got lauded, and was being pegged for a possible Oscar winner. It just looks like somebody, in makeup acting. And rather than actually hunting a performance,
I'm assuming it's a serious film.
Yes, it is a serious film. Yes, it's a dead serious.
Very serious, doesn't it?
Very serious.
That's the only thing that threw me off, which was looking at kind of the occasional clips on trailers and just thinking, well, it's Steve Carell. It looks like
he's serious though. He's very good in Little Miss Sunshine, playing pretty straight in that one.
I know, but when he looks straight, you just kind of half expect him to say, "I love lamp."
Yeah, you see, because that's a lot of his comic performances are played dead straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Anyway, Most Violent Year, I am interested in seeing. Foxcatcher, not so much. And there's also Into the Woods, the film version of the Stephen Sondheim musical, which I've got absolutely no interest in whatsoever.
Okay, so that's our Blu-ray and films at the cinema this Friday. So this Friday, if you're into Mad Max, then go to the cinema. If not, there's 3 Blu-rays, but Steve desperately wants to see one of them. He might want to see the other one, and he definitely doesn't want to see the last one. that about right?
That sums it up nicely, Phil. Thank you.
Right, so to wrap up on the podcast today is there's a new documentary about the aborted attempt by Tim Burton to make Superman Lives with Nicolas Cage. This is the first time I've ever heard about this, Steve.
Have you not heard about this?
I've never heard about this.
In the there was a bit like Mad Max. There was a very, very long period where they were trying to bring Superman back to the big screen after Superman for the Quest for Peace, which I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. I almost walked out of because it was so bad. That was a terrible, terrible film done on the cheap by Golan and Globus, and it was just dreadful. And it killed the Superman franchise for quite a long time. But Warner Brothers, is one of their big characters, and they wanted to bring him back to the big screen, and they spent a long time doing various different ideas, one of which, interestingly, was Batman versus Superman, which is now what's actually going to happen next year. But they eventually came up with the idea of they were going to do Superman Lives, where he, based upon one of the stories in the comic book. And Tim Burton came on board to direct it. Thought, Tim Burton, great, he did Batman, he can do Superman as well. He got up on board Nicolas Cage. Now, Nicolas Cage as Superman in itself, I would quite like to see that, just out of curiosity. They spent a lot of money on this. They went through various screenplays.
As an alcoholic Superman.
Well, just Nicolas Cage's fake does not look like Superman to me, but I know he's a massive Superman fan. He actually named his son Kal-El. That's how much of a Superman fan he is. Yeah, he was on board. They brought Kevin Smith on board, another big comic book fan, to write the screenplay. And Kevin Smith's done some really good stand-up in one of his evenings with, talking about his experiences writing this film. And if you haven't seen it, get it on, watch it on YouTube. Seriously, it's hysterically funny when he talks about dealing with John Peters, who was the producer who also produced Batman, and is best known, as, in my opinion, for being Barbra Streisand's hairdresser. But this guy is bonkers. And he was the guy producing Superman Lives. Burton was directing it. Kevin Smith was writing it. And Nicolas Cage was going to play Superman. Now, come on, don't you want to see that film? I want to see that film. This documentary called The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, ? Is about what did happen and why the film eventually never got made. And they were almost to the point of principal photography on this. That's how close it came. So there's footage in it of Nicolas Cage in the Superman, various costumes they were developing and all that sort of stuff. So, it nearly went to production. It just dropped down at the last minute. And then they ended up doing what became Superman Returns, the Bryan Singer movie in 2006, I think it was. And that film got lumbered with all the development costs for this, by the way. So for the previous 15 years, so that film ended up costing $250 million because it got dumped with all the money that Warner's had spent in the previous 15 years on other aborted Superman films. Anyway, that's what this is about. This is about this film that didn't get made. And I've got to say that some of the best documentaries about films are the ones about films that didn't get made. So there's a great documentary about Jodorowsky's attempt to make Dune into a film that's really worth checking out if you get a chance. Very, very interesting and very funny. There's a fantastic documentary about Terry Gilliam's
What's it called?
attempt. What's the Dune documentary called?
Yeah.
Jodorowsky's Dune is called.
Okay.
Is
it on Netflix? Any streaming services?
It's on Blu-ray. I've got the Blu-ray. It might be available. I haven't seen it, but worth checking. It was a Sony release, so it might be on there now. It came out on disc last summer. I got the Blu-ray, and I highly recommend it. If you're a fan of Dune, the book, the David Lynch version of Dune, and just interested in movies in general, this is one that absolutely bonkers. His concepts were absolutely bonkers. He was going to have Pink Floyd doing the music. Actually, he was going to have different bands doing different music for different planets. So Pink Floyd were going to do, I don't know which planet they were going to do, maybe the Harkonnen. He had Geiger. It was interesting, actually, because what happened was he put together this team to make this film based upon his screenplay, based upon Dune. And the idea was that H.R. Geiger was going to design the Harkonnen planet. And a lot of his work that went on to that ended up becoming the work he did in Alien. Dan O'Bannon was brought on to do the effects. A lot of the work he did on that, he carried forward when he got involved with Alien because he wrote the screenplay for Alien. So a lot of what happened was that the film never got made, but a lot of people that were brought together, Chris Foss, other designers like that, they ended up working on Alien instead. So Alien kind of was born out of this abortive attempt to make Dune. So it's a really interesting documentary, and I highly recommend it. Again, about a film that never got made. Same with, what was it called? Lost in La Mancha, which is about the making, or his attempt to make Terry Gilliam's film about Don Quixote, which, again, never happened. And it's just one of those, basically, the lesson on that one is you don't go into a film without enough money and an old aging leading man who can't do it. Basically, it just he had so much bad luck, bad weather. Again, the weather turned against him. It was basically washed out. It turned out where they were trying to shoot was actually a live firing ground for the Spanish army as well, which probably wasn't a good idea. Jets flying over and bombs going off all around them. It was just bad pre-production, basically bad planning. And it sank the film. But again, that's worth checking out. And one of my all-time favourite documentaries, I'm sure Ed will agree with this, about the making of a film. This one did get made, but amazingly, you kind of wonder how they did manage to make it. Hearts of Darkness, about the making of Apocalypse Now, which is a brilliant documentary that's really funny and just has this kind of, they got recordings that Eleanor Coppola made at the time, of like conversations on the phone that Coppola's having. Really, you get into the real heart of the making of that film and how utterly bonkers it was. And I can't recommend that highly enough either.
A few minutes behind, but Jodorowsky's Dune is on Netflix Canada, in case you can
there you go.
That. There you go. I know we've mentioned it before, but that Keanu Reeves documentary, I've probably only ever watched one documentary about movies, and that was it, which was Side by Side, which was a kind of a comparison between digital filmmaking and old school film capture, which I found was really quite fascinating and a good place to start if you didn't know nothing about how film was captured.
I think one of the, if we're talking about extras or documentaries about film, I'd have to say The Hamster Factor and Other Tales of the 12 Monkeys. I absolutely love that.
It was the same team that did Lost in La Mancha, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
All right. Really, really good documentary. Well put together. And it just shows you how mad Gilliam actually is.
Been years since I've watched it, but the shark is still working. The
Jaws one.
That's quite good.
There's a couple of decent ones on Jaws. There's that one, and there's the fan made one, which I'm trying to remember the name of now, and I can't remember it.
Is that not The Shark is Still Working? Isn't that
No, the one of them is one is still working, and the other one was The Shark Isn't Working.
You're right. Yeah, there's two.
I always get them mixed up, which is which. One was a fan. It started off as a fan-based thing and actually morphed into one of the best documentaries on Jaws. But there's loads of them. And if you like your books, Steve, I know you like your books and stuff. I picked one up when I was in Canada. Jaws, Memories from Martha's Vineyard, I think it's called. It's a big A3 size book, and it's beautiful photograph, all behind-the-scenes stuff.
Did you buy that in the end?
I did, yeah.
It was quite expensive, wasn't it?
Yes. But,
yeah, it did look good, but it was a bit toppy on the price point. So
yeah, but I think if you're a big fan of Jaws, and Jaws is probably in my top 3, then I thought it was worth spending the money on, because it's one of those souvenir things that you can keep for forever.
A great documentary, if you can watch it. If you've got the original, I think it's available on some of the other re-releases as well, but certainly the original DVD release of The Phantom Menace has that documentary, The Beginning.
Empire.
Not Empire Dreams.
No.
The Beginning. The one that's about making a Phantom Menace. I think it's called The Beginning. It's a 1 hour.
Oh no, I couldn't have watched that because that Rick McCallum was in it, and I just wanted to throw things at the screen.
It's one of those rare examples when the truth, it's none of it's there's no talking in interviews. It's all footage at the time, shot at the time of during production, and post production, right up to the moment when they're about to screen the first screening for fans of the Phantom Menace. And there's some really brutal stuff in there, really honest stuff, where Lucas is going like he knows he's screwed up with hiring the kid, that he can't carry the scenes, and he's having to find ways of fixing it. Where people are watching the first edit, and they're afterwards screen, they're all looking around, and you can see they're thinking, this doesn't work, this is not very good. It's really quite worth watching to see. But they never did it again after that. They were never that honest. It was really honest and probably a little bit too honest. You could see where things were going off the rails already at that point in the first film, and it just got progressively worse after that. But that's worth checking out. I think it's called The Beginning.
But Rick McCallum's all over that, isn't he? Because I'm sure I started.
Yeah, but he's like the cheerleader. Going, it's going to be good. But even he, I think there's a couple of scenes where even he knows.
He grew a chin like George Lucas. There's two I really like. There was one that was done by BBC on George Lucas, which was really well done, and I'm trying to remember what that was called. I don't think it's ever been released on disc. That's the only thing. I think it was only ever shown on the BBC. It basically started in Modesto, where he had his car crash, and then it was all about his early career and stuff. I really like that.
Yeah.
And the other one is Empire of Dreams. I think that's one of the best Star Wars documentaries.
There's still, I think, room for good. I think I mentioned these before, but there's 3 really great books called The Making of Star Wars, The Making of Empire Strikes Back, and The Making of Return of the Jedi, which are constructed purely of contemporary interviews and not anything post. No stuff interviewed now where they start trying to change the past. It's all stuff at the time, and so you get an idea, particularly with Star Wars. I think there's a room now for a really good documentary about the making of Star Wars, because the pressure Lucas was under to deliver that film, the risk they were taking in terms of whether the effects were ever going to work, whether ILM were going to deliver. What happened with the first edit and how he changed it and basically fired one of the editors and brought in his wife, Luke Marcia, who did an unsung hero. I think she does a fantastic job of bringing that film together by the end. A lot of people that were involved in Star Wars, like Marcia Lucas, like Gary Kurtz, who aren't involved in the later stuff, particularly after Empire, you can see where they perhaps weren't getting enough credit, I don't think, for what they did. But I think there's a good documentary made there. They kind of cover it a little bit in Empire of the Dreams, but not in enough detail, I don't think. But you're right, it is a good documentary about all 3 of the original films.
Talking about fan-based documentaries, Jamie Benn, and I know Jamie listens into the podcast now and again, go and check out Jamie's stuff on Vimeo. They're called filmumentaries. They're about each of the Star Wars films, the original Star Wars films. I think he's done one on Jaws as well.
And did he do one on Raiders too?
And he did one on Raiders. I think he did one on Raiders. Let me just double quick check on Vimeo, because that's where you'll find his stuff. So he did Returning to Jedi, Star Wars Begins, Inside Jaws, Building Empire. And there was the one on Indiana Jones, which I can't seem to find at the minute. But if you get a chance, go and have a look. Raiders of the Lost Ark, a filmumentary. It's fan-made, but I think he's certainly had a lot of interest from studios into turning his stuff into proper productions that will get seen. So if you get a chance, have a look at Jamie's stuff. And I know he listens into the podcast. Love your stuff, Jamie. Keep sending.
I would say his Star Wars stuff is better than anything that's been officially released by Lucasfilm.
Well, there you go. There's high praise. Steve's obviously after something. Yeah. Date maybe.
No, they are really, really good. Really well thought out and full of interesting details.
So what we'll do is we'll put links to Jamie's stuff on Vimeo within the podcast thread, and if you get a chance, go and have a look at them. They are really well put together, little fun films.
What about you, Mark? Any interesting documentaries about Asian cinema that we want to watch?
No, not about that. But if we're on a kind of, it's not specifically about documenting of the film being made as such, but about the film Room 237, about The Shining.
Yeah, that's really good.
Well worth a look. It's more about viewers and interpretation, because of course, Kubrick was this kind of almost mythical figure. It's very hard to get to the root of how he designed things and what the meaning was behind his films. But say all about The Shining and the different fan views of what it was, their interpretations, which obviously range from the genocide of the Native Americans to the Holocaust, to the moon landing. Yeah, but it's they're cogent arguments. They're quite well put together. Obviously, at times you kind of feel like you are listening to a kind of stoned conversation, but there is always that little seed of, Kubrick didn't do much without having a reason to do it. So therefore, as mad as the theories are, it's kind of a film as much about the power of filmmaking and how it can be kind of all things to all people.
Yeah. There's also, if you're interested in Kubrick, the Life in Pictures. What was that? Life in Pictures? Yeah, I think it's Life in Pictures. The one's narrated by Tom Cruise about his entire career that they did after his death. Is also a good watch.
Today's been the Steve Withers show.
It hasn't half, hasn't it?
That's not strictly true. The first half was very light on me, in all fairness. The second half, though.
You didn't half make up for the second half, though, eh?
Game of two halves.
And on that bombshell, that's it for the AVForums podcast this week. My thanks to Steve Withers,
Jimmy the Goose, larger than life, and Two Ices Ugly.
Mark Hodgkinson.
I think we've got some hoon trouble.
Mark Botwright.
Nothing a year in the tropics wouldn't fix.
And Ed Selley.
Kick her in the guts.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark avforums.com for latest reviews, news and video, and you can also leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thanks very much for listening, and we will see you again next Wednesday.